Today we're talking about this one, the Discovery, the start of the David trilogy. And it's important that I mention the word trilogy because not only does it make that clear on the back of this book, but it also makes it a bit more difficult to review these three books, especially individually. Whether I do a full trilogy review at some point is yet to be seen. This book is the first of those three. And for that reason, I don't think it's as good as basically the thing's greater than the sum of its parts. Put it that way. It's not a bad book by any stretch before you start to make conclusions like that. Let's go over this book and find out how we come across the sixth Animorph. Because apparently Axe is still not counted as an Animorph. I imagine Animorph stands for human that's been given the power to morph. Marco's in school trying to chat up women. That's how the book starts. Yeah, thankfully it stops quite quickly. Because Marco sees a new kid in school walking down the corridor and he's got a blue box. What's he doing? Is he just carrying it around like that? Whatever, he sees it and he instantly locks eyes on that thing. That thing there. I suppose... yeah, that thing would stand out. Big glowing thing, so... got an actual prop this time. So David's just wandering around, yada, yada, yada. And Marco sees this thing. And he goes up to David and says, "Whoa, what's that thing you got there?" And David just says, "Oh, I just found this in a cement block. Sort of stored away in a cement block at the construction site." So Marco says, "I'll give you money for it." David says, "No." They split off. And then Marco talks to Jake about it. And of course, this is a big deal. Because this kid is wandering around in the open with that thing. Not good. Because we don't want the Yeerks to have the power to morph. So, the Animorphs decide that they're going to spy on David and find out if they can get the cube off of him. At some point in this book also we find out that it's called an Escafil device for the first time. Axe calls it the Escafil device. Just that little bit of knowledge for you, just so you know. It was this book where it's first mentioned. Now you know. I would like to ask, how did the cube get into a little cubby in a cement block, like a little hole? How did it get there? Because let's go back to book one. Where did we leave the blue box? It was never... I mean, they were given the power to morph, and then the Visser came down and did his Vissery thing. Where the fuck did this cube go? And I thought to myself, okay, so Elfangor has got the cube, and he sees the Visser coming down. He says, right, those kids have now got the morphing power. I've got this cube. The Visser is coming down. Here, Animorphs, take this. But be very careful with it, and don't just give it to any old person. There, take it. Tobias grabs it, off he trots. But no, it just disappeared. It's never mentioned. What's happened to it? It's just there in the construction site. It was... The way they talk about it is that when Arfangor's ship was destroyed, it got sort of blasted away and ended up in this little cubbyhole in this concrete block. But this thing, right? Somebody's going to see that. It's night time. It isn't buried or anything, because Elfangor's just had it up here, and he's probably just, I don't know, fucking dropped it. And it's just on the ground next to him. Visser comes up next to him. He would see that fucking cube. Where did it go? Elfangor never went back into the ship, neither did any animal, so it didn't go back into the ship, so it must be on the ground somewhere. Where did it come from? Where did it go? Where did you come from, blue box thing? Maybe the Elmist? I think that's just going to be my go-to for when I can't explain something and the book doesn't even try. Oh, the Elmist did it. That's him. Anyway, they spy on this kid. They find out where he lives and they decide that they're going to go in the dead of night over to David's house where there is a window open and they're going to go in, grab the box, fly back out. Seems like a pretty straightforward task. So they meet at the McDonald's and Eric shows up. And Eric has been sleuthing. And he's found out that 6 of the big world leaders, you know, your US, UK, Russia, France, Lesotho, are all gathering at the Marriott Hotel nearby. And this is a big deal because Eric says we know that at least one of them is a controller. And you think, all right, Eric, so you know one of them's a controller, then surely you must know which one it is? How do you not... How have you found out one thing and not the other there? They should both... I don't know. Eric's powers are obviously limited. But he tells them about that. And the Animorphs are like, yeah, we'll sort this David thing out first, then we'll deal with the Marriott Hotel thing. This part annoyed me. They draw straws to decide who goes to David's house to retrieve the cube. It's night time. What are the best morphs to fly around in? Owls. So you can see better. I'm pretty sure it's Rachel and Cassie. I could be wrong, but pretty sure it's Rachel and Cassie have owl morphs. I know at least 2 of them have owl morphs. Send them, Jake. Why are we doing this straws thing? Just say, right, you've got the best morphs, you do it. You don't need the straws anymore, Jake. You know your team's strengths. Play to it. Be the leader. Delegate. Instead of just leaving it to this lazy thing, which means that you can't fucking see anything out there in your eagle and your osprey fucking morphs. If it is Rachel that does have the owl morph, I don't know why she didn't morph it, but yeah, I could be wrong. It could be one of the others. I know Cassie's got an owl morph. Yes, Rachel does have an owl morph, because I remember she went to go visit Tobias in owl morph in book 7. Why didn't she morph owl? Plot hole! Shouldn't be surprised at this point, really. It really is a plot hole, because it just seems like the simple solution to the problem. Go in owl morph. For one thing, you're not going to be too big to go into the window like it turns out Rachel is. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Jake, sort it. To help remind Rachel that she has this fucking morph and go... So they go to the house. Jake... No, not Jake. Marco, Rachel and Tobias is surveying. David's in his pool outside. And Tobias is tasked... Rachel, I think, is tasked with looking at David to make sure he doesn't come into the room. Marco flies up, and because he isn't an owl, he can't see the stick in the window, knocks the stick, window closes. Bad news. Goes in, hits the wall, falls back behind a wardrobe, and there's a cat there. And we all know cats are bastards, so this cat starts to attack him. Rachel crashes through the window in the typical Rachel fashion. And they work together to try to get the morphing cube. But obviously at this point, nobody is looking out for David because Tobias hit the window and is quoting fucking Cluedo. It wasn't, I think it was trying to be funny. It really wasn't. And yeah, they take the cube. They try to run away with it. They get downstairs. David's chasing them with a pellet gun because he's got a pellet gun. And there was a strange moment. Let's discuss it. Page 13. We're in the barn discussing what to do. And Marco has just talked about Cassie in the previous book where she left the group. She came back, of course, but since then I'd felt a little shaky around her. Cassie has way too many morals and ethics. She's always wondering whether something is right or wrong. Me, I just wonder, will it work or not? So that's what Marco says on page 13. Let's go to page 34. I could either jump up and rake his eyeballs or give up the box. But David was not a controller, he was not an enemy. And even I don't think you can just go around tearing into innocent bystanders. I jumped back from the box, the door slid open, and Rachel and I flapped across the back lawn, over the pool, above the fence and out of there. So that's a contradiction. That's clearly a contradiction. She's always wondering whether something's right or wrong. Me, I just wonder, will it work or not? What's your task? Get the blue box. It's incredibly important. So when it comes down to it, you decide to make that decision of whether this is right or wrong. And you decide to take the moral route. So Marco, in the space of 20 pages, has just done a complete 180 on his own character, essentially. It doesn't make sense. He is supposed to be the cold, calculated one. He even says that in the book. I just do the thing that gets the job done. I make those cold decisions. But when it fucking comes down to it, getting that thing back, he turns into Cassie. Oh, I can't rake an innocent bystander. I've got to let him keep the cube. No, Marco, stop. So because they've failed, they're going to try again. David has gone to see Marco in the school cafeteria the day that they're going to try it in the second attempt and says, oh, there are these birds trying to sneak in. And he tells Marco about his dad being in the secret services like CIA or something like that. Turns out that David has set an email to be sent out at the same time he finishes school, because he's put it up for sale on the internet and somebody's interested. Marco says, you don't want to give out your address. David says, I've got an email sending out when I'm home so that I don't cause any trouble. I don't see how that stops trouble being caused, David, but fair enough, whatever. These are the old days of the internet. And Marco panics, of course, thinking, shit, I've got like 2 hours before this email is sent out, and God only knows what happens. Visser is probably ready and waiting in his limousine, in his Yeerk, just like looking at his watch, waiting for this email to go. You wouldn't be looking at his watch, he doesn't know what's happening, but he's waiting for the reply to this email saying he wants it, just like, fucking, as soon as that email comes through, we're bolting, lads. Marco goes to get Axe, which takes some time, because Axe is in this massive 25-kilometre squared area. Finds Axe, but by the time that happens, he's got very little time. Axe morphs, and they head over to David's house. They find Tobias in the meantime, who helps them find David's house because they get a bit lost. All this means they've lost time. They go into David's house by demorphing in his back garden and opening the back door, which causes the alarm to go off. Very, very sad news. Rush upstairs, get to the computer and find the computer screen and start to work it around. But somebody comes home. Turns out it's David's dad. Shock horror! The CIA agent, essentially law enforcement, and we know he's got a weapon. Axe goes and hides in a closet. Marco rolls under the bed. We learnt recently that David has a pet cobra. He shouldn't be allowed a pet cobra, but apparently his dad just brought it back home for him. Pretty irresponsible, really, for a CIA agent. This snake is called Spawn, and apparently it's not kept in a sealed box. It's just let loose in the house. The box is under the bed, and this cobra, this fucking cobra, is just let loose in the house. And that Marco pisses me off on page 53. How could you trust a kid who'd own a snake? Yeah, fuck off, Marco. I had a snake when I was a teenager, and she was a lovely little corn snake called Lola, and she was absolutely smashing. Fuck you, Marco. I've now got 4 snakes. I've got 2 over there and 2 upstairs. You might have seen them in the past, at least on my other channel. I have another channel. It's not related, by the way. So yeah, that's a special fuck you to Marco, alright? But regardless, we carry on. So this snake is apparently, I will say, it is a bit weird. Even as a snake owner, I look at somebody just having a pet cobra loose around the house and think, yeah, that's pretty dodgy. I wouldn't do that. That's a bit weird. He gets bitten by this snake. Yeah, not only is it loose in the house, but it's also eager to strike and bite. This guy's in the CIA, so he's obviously very smart, but he's also thick as shit at the same time. He's trying to work that out. Marco acquires the snake. Snake crawls away into a closet somewhere. David's dad comes in. Oh, he didn't crawl away. The snake is still there now. Still, Marco's holding on to the snake. And David's dad comes walking in. Stompy, stompy, stomp. Who the fuck's in here then? And he hears something going under the bed and he says, right, I know you're under there. Come on out. And then Axe provides the distraction with a bump. Now, that seems fair. And then you realise he's morphed Spider. Thump. A muffled noise. I saw the black shoe swivel to face the cupboard. It was Axe providing a distraction. Good old Axe. I held on to that stupid snake as I focused. When animals are acquired, blah, 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 but not the snake, blah, blah, blah. The cupboard door opened. All right, step out here, and geez Louise, I heard the sound of a gun being holstered, and then the big black shoes started doing a little dance called Stomp the Bug. So in the space of 3 sentences, Axe has gone from being big enough to bang, make that distraction, and then he's a spider. He's fully morphed into a spider. Now, I criticise the TV show for having speed morphing all the time. And for the longest time, the main series didn't do it. It seemed relatively consistent, with Morphs taking quite a while. But the last few books, I'd say within the last cycle, the last 5 books, it's happened far too much, where we're just getting fast and loose, quite literally, with the morphing speed. It just, as the plot requires. Does he need to be able to make the thumping noise and then be instantly a spider? Great, speed morph, go. It's just bad writing, I'm sorry. That is, unless it wasn't Axe doing the thump, it was just a complete coincidence that in the process of demorphing, something came loose and eventually just banged against something. If that is the case, then I take it all back. Okay, sound fair? Good. Would like to point out as well that David's dad has already sussed that there's somebody under the bed. He made that point perfectly clear. He starts yelling at the person under the bed, and shortly after a snake gets thrown at him. Spawn then slithers away, goes and hides. And then the doorbell rings. From downstairs I heard, "Hey, look, I told your office I didn't need you to send you. Wasted your time, probably just a false alarm. I have it under control." Right. I know you're CIA, mate, but for fuck's sake, if you honestly suspect somebody's hiding under your bed, don't take fucking chances. Say, yeah, can you just come check with me for a second? Just give me backup, just in case. No, this guy's a fucking idiot. And he's even more of an idiot in a few minutes. Marco morphs the Cobra as a way to get out, essentially. And then he sees Axe and strikes and eats Axe. Wrong. Cobras, at least full-grown cobras, don't go for bugs. They just don't. It's not worth it for the snake. It's just too small a meal. It's a very, very rare case in which a cobra would eat something like a spider. So again, it just seemed needless. Why have that in there? It's not right. It's just not right. Marco then hears Tobias, who's still hovering outside, wondering what the fuck is going on. And he says, "Oh, you got more trouble now because David's just got home." And that's when Marco decides to say to David's dad, "Wait, he's been..." Because... Let's backtrack a second. The reason why they wanted the snake to eat the spider is because then they'd have a panic that Axe would be envenomated by the Cobra and would have to demorph immediately, which means David's dad would see the demorphing. So once again, plot convenience. It doesn't make sense that the snake would eat the spider, but hey, we need the plot convenience to get the show rolling on. And Axe starts to demorph in front of David's dad, who's now pointing the gun at the demorphing Andalite. And so Marco decides to pretend to be a space alien and starts talking to David's dad, saying, "We come from," I think it was Nexus 5 or some shit like that. Is that a Star Trek reference? I'm not sure. I never watched Star Trek. But some sci-fi thing it was a reference to. Obviously not thinking that David's dad would watch TV at all. But regardless, starts to talk to David's dad, who's still pointing the gun. Tobias then calls down, saying David's home now, and David eventually comes up and sees what's going on, sees Axe as an Andalite, pretty much fully demorphed now, and thinking, what the fuck's going on here? And the stupidest bloody line, just before David gets up into the room to see his dad, I can't fucking believe it. So David's dad is talking to aliens, right? He's seeing Axe have demorphed, this bizarre sight that you'd never think to see ever. This must be one of the most shocking moments of his life. He must be on full alert, he's got gun pointed. This is it, his mind is fully focused. "Earthling," Marco yelled, "your son ditched school early." The FBI/CIA secret whatever agency... Fucking hell, that's a bad sentence. His eyes flickered. He what? He ditched last period. "I came home from work early," David's father said. "Ha, got him. I'll ground him for a month." Marco even goes on later on, saying... Well, David's father says, "I told you to stop that. snapping back to the fact that maybe, just maybe, having an alien in his house was slightly more important than catching his son skipping a class. Yeah. So this is all happening in front of you. And one of them says, your son ditched school early. And he's like, oh my, yes, I get to ground him now, or something like that. It's like, mate, seriously? Fucking seriously? That should be the least on your mind right now. Least important thing on your mind right now. And I think it was, because he brings it up again later, I think it was just for comedy, and it just fucking falls flat. It's not for... It just ruins the tension of the moment, and it's just, I don't like it. I don't like it. Sorry. Spawn, the real Cobra, then crawls out of the closet. What would be the logical thing to do here? David's dad shoots Marco's Cobra, the morphed Cobra. Why? I mean, I know Americans are a bit gun nuts, but... Okay, so you've got this snake in the middle of the room, and then you've got an andlite that's just morphed, and then another snake comes out, so you shoot that snake. Considering as well that this is a family pet, you might just want to, you know, take a step back and think, all right, how do I handle this situation now? Rather than just bang, bang. What the fuck? David's dad is a fucking moron. And then it all kicks off. Because the email has been sent out. It's sent out a little while ago. And so the Yeerks arrive pretty sharpish, which is not that surprising, really. As I said, the Visser was probably on standby in his limousine nearby. Just like, fucking, where is it? As soon as they got the message, fucking rocket firing out the back of this thing. Possibly quite literally. I mean, they are aliens after all. But they arrive and they got a big moving van with them. And in pops a bunch of Hork-Bajir. At around the same time, the other Animorphs have shown up as well. Or they are in the process of showing up. These Hork-Bajir come in. David's dad is like, what the fuck's going on here? David as well. And then it just becomes chaos. There's a massive fight scene. Axe decides to slice David's dad's finger off, mostly to get rid of the gun. Marco, despite being shot, is going around biking Hork-Bajir legs. Visser 3 comes in, and he says, haha, I am evil. And he's looking around for the blue box. And yeah, it's just hell breaks loose. The other Animorphs arrive, so Rachel comes in Grizzly, Jake's there in Tiger. I don't know why my accent went like that. Apparently, Cassie and Tobias are downstairs. Which makes me think, okay, so you've got all your firepower upstairs and your flank is covered, or your back is covered by the two weakest morphs. I mean, substantially the weakest morphs. Cassie in Wolf Morph has always been the weakest by far. And then you've got Tobias, who we can only assume is Hawk, because his only other strong morph is Hork-Bajir. And we've seen in the Time of Dinosaurs that he seems reluctant to use that, at least at this stage in the book series. So we can only imagine that there are Hork-Bajir downstairs fighting a hawk and a wolf, which seems a bit one-sided. All the firepower seems to have gone upstairs, and it's madness. Hork-Bajir are like creating holes in walls. So is Rachel, and you know, there's like furniture flying out the window. And it gets me thinking, how big is this kid's room? Honestly, think about a kid's room. I mean, it's not like he's in a mansion or anything, because at the start, or near the start of the book, when they first find David's house, Marco's like, oh, it's just a typical 2-story job, you know, nothing too fancy. So you can't imagine... I mean, I'm looking at my front room now, which is both a combined living room and dining room. And it's quite a big room. It is. It stretches quite far that way. It doesn't stretch that far this way. But I can't imagine this would be any bigger, any smaller than David's room. In fact, I reckon this room is bigger. It should be. And I cannot see, for the life of me, 2 andalites, a grizzly bear, a tiger. Granted, the snake takes up no size, so don't count that. And probably, judging by the book, at least like 5-6 Hork-Bajir. Fuck, you'd be like that. Fucking give you a wallop of that side, fucking slice you that side. Crammed in like that, it would be like fucking Hillsborough in there. Oh shit. Yeah, it'd be like fucking Hillsborough in there. Jesus, where's... I mean, I know they smashed through a couple of walls which would allow more space, but at the start, it's just like, it's fucking cramped in. It's just a bit unbelievable. The wall to the bathroom is smashed in, and David and his dad go in there. And then there's a stalemate. Visser morphs one of his hideous morphs, which fires its arms at people, which is quite cool. And then David... they know that it's going to be a losing fight, essentially, so they say, right, we need to get out of here. Jake says that. We need to get out of here. Where's the blue box? Mark says, David knows. They ask David, who just stands up and basically says, I've got the blue box, just, you know, it's in my backpack, just stop all this crap, this madness. Please cease the madness. And then obviously both sides just go, grab the fucking box. Rachel knocks a few Hawk-Bajir aside and gets to David first. Doesn't knock him through the wall because conveniently at the time, Visser 3 fires his arm, breaks the wall first, and then they get sent through. I don't understand. So David must have been stood aside from his dad. Rachel hits him. 2 Hawk-Bajir grab Marco's dad and they'll take him away. Visser 3 apparently doesn't want to follow the blue box into the back garden or the front or wherever, which is fucking stupid. Because do you remember book 18? Do you remember how impulsive he was? That he smashed himself out of a hospital window as a fucking cat-fit bird and chased somebody around a McDonald's. Yeah. That Visser 3 will not jump out of a suburban home window to retrieve the Escafil device. Do we really believe that? That he's just going to say, nope, I'm not going to go for that. Writers... seriously, what the fuck? Now, Visser 3, if we're judging him by the character he was in 18, assuming he's still the same character, he would have fucking bolted for that. Doesn't matter if they're outside of a house. They would have just bolted. Anybody in the near vicinity, either kill them or take them. There you go, that's Visser 3's character. He doesn't just look out the window and say, oh, that's a bit of a risk. Oh, I'm going to play it safe this time. No, that's not how it would go. I'm sorry. I apologise. So because Visser 3 doesn't bother chasing them, they're able to get David away to like a little alleyway somewhere. And he comes to after they have a little deliberation. And they discuss what they're going to do. He is going to be a chaste person. The Yeerks are going to be after him. They know that. He knows about them, essentially. He has a rough idea of... that basically he's a risk to them. If he gets caught, he's a risk to them. And they don't want to just let him go to the Yeerks. His parents are now both taken. He hasn't got a home, essentially. So they deliberate on it and they say, we could turn him into another Animorph. Now, it was Axe that came up with the suggestion. And this weirded me out a bit. Because Zero's kindness. We all know Zero's kindness. You don't give your alien technology to other alien races. And Axe is the one that suggests, oh, why don't we just give him the morphing power? I understand that, especially after book 18, that might change somewhat. Because Axe in that book came to almost a conclusion that he fights for the humans as well. So in a way, it's understandable that he would forget that rule to benefit this team that he's currently with. That's understandable. What I find strange is that he doesn't bring it up at all. It didn't strike me right. It didn't feel right that Axe didn't at some point say, well, Zero's kindness, but this is a desperate situation, and he suggests it, and then just he doesn't roll with it because he votes no when they come to the decision, but it felt like he should have mentioned it in some way. It felt like it was needed. But they have a vote because Jake doesn't want to make that decision for himself, which is fair. And they vote, yes, let's turn him into an Animorph. Because they think if we want to turn more people into Animorphs, we've got to start somewhere. The big argument against it is we don't know this guy. Marco's big argument is that he called his cat Megadeth, and he's got a bad taste in music, therefore he's a bad person. Right. Marco, you can sit this one out. Let the fucking big boys talk about this shit. We then get the initiation stuff, because they've decided to give him the morphing power. They take him to Cassie's barn, and on page 99, oh my god, is Marco a cunt. I hate to use such strong language, but god damn, he's a cunt here. This kid, right, his parents have just been taken. His home has been destroyed. He is, for all intents and purposes, homeless. His life has just been ruined. You don't know the guy. He's new to the school. He's probably on edge before all this fucking kicks off. He's just seen his snake being... By the way, I just want to bring up Spawn. Marco escaped by hiding under the slats of David's bed just as they were escaping. And the Hork-Bajir bagged Spawn, the actual Cobra. And Marco said, oh dear, he's not going to do too well. We have heard before that Vista 3 has got a torture chamber. We've actually heard that. He's got a torture chamber on his blade ship. And it brings me close to tears to just think of this poor little... Spawn the Cobra is just in this torture chamber, just being tortured. It's like, what the... spare a moment for Spawn, honestly. Poor little bugger. But yeah, all this shit has happened to David. And Marco just straight up berates him about how his parents are being tortured, essentially. Not necessarily tortured, but, I mean, you could call being a slave to the Yeerks a type of torture. And he just stand in front of David and said, right, what they're going to do, they're going to take him, they're going to fucking hustle them over to a bloody pier, and they're going to beat them, and they're going to shove their head into sludgy water, and a Yeerk's going to crawl in their ear, and he's going to go... Rah! And then they're going to stand up, and they're going to hate everything. They're going to hate their lives. They're going to rat out their friends, and they're going to suffer. And you better fucking know it. And you just think, wow. Yeah, maybe for whatever reason... Wait, so Marco doesn't like the kid because he calls his cat Megadeth. That's about the gist of it. That's all we really know as why Marco doesn't like him. He names his cat Megadeth and he has a pet snake. Can't trust this guy. Therefore, when it comes down to it...
Your parents are fucking in hell right now, and you ought to be sad.
Are we starting to get Demon Marco out here? It's awful. It's awful to read. You just read it thinking, fucking hell. Marco. Jesus Christ. It's no wonder the kid went fucking psycho. It really does make you question Marco's character here. There really is no need for it. And he finishes with the line, are you getting the picture? Fuck Marco. I don't use the word cunt often. I've never used it in this series because it is that tier of shithousery. But this deserves it. Seriously. Fucking hell, Marco. And then Marco, for the rest of the book, is like, oh, I don't think this David character likes me. No fucking shit! You brought it on yourself, you little cunt. Do you know what? Marco has always been one of my favourites, but that really brings my estimations down on him. I think at the moment, Jake and Cassie are my favourites, which I didn't I expected Jake, but Cassie's really risen up the ranks, and Marco, after this one's just gone... He's a little dick, isn't he? So, despite all this, David decides to stick with them. Doesn't like Marco very much, but who the hell can blame him? And he gets his first morph, which turns out to be a golden eagle that Cassie's releasing. And of course, in the background to all of this, we know that there's the Marriott Hotel mission coming up. And David's first job is that. This is where you've got to take a look at Jake and say, right, so you've made this decision to have this new Animorph. Is it worth taking him on his first mission without training with a variety of morphs? Is it worth taking him on that specific mission? Any responsible leader will say, no. We need to make sure that he's comfortable with certain morphs before we go into these sorts of situations. But no. Jake just brings him along for the ride. Which I think is a dramatic failing of leadership. Yeah, Jake, you're scoring low in this book, mate. Up to this point, I've had nothing but sympathy for David. Up to this point, you'll notice I say that. They're flying towards the Marriott Hotel place. And David's trying out his new bird morph, the golden eagle, when he's having an absolute blast. And then he attacks a crow, seemingly out of nowhere, and just not sure whether he kills the crow, but certainly damages it enough that it just tumbles out of the air. And the others are like, well, what'd you do that for? What the hell are you doing? David says, I lost control for a minute. It just took over. Marco inwardly thinks, yeah, I know a liar when I hear one, and I'm pretty sure that guy was lying just then. Can't be sure, but I think he's lying. And we as the readers, we can't be sure either. We can have our suspicions like Marco. The guy's morph, this is his first morph. So in a way you think, he's really giddy, it's his first morph, his life is in fucking turmoil at the moment. It may be understandable that he just let himself get lost in this eagle mind, and the eagle saw a crow and attacked, and then he woke up from that and thought, oh yeah, it just took control briefly. But the way Marco says it, the way the book says it, we instantly have that suspicion. But if you take a step back and think about it, it is understandable that he would just get lost in it. Just think about it. First morph, really giddy moment. The rest of your life is just turned to shit. So your mind is probably a jumbled mess at this point anyway. And maybe it just sink back into the golden eagle mind. You cannot on this say, right, from this we know that David is a dick. We don't know that yet. And we can't yet jump to that conclusion. Turns out Marine Force One is coming along. That's the president's helicopter. So they know that the president of the United States is arriving towards the Marriott Hotel. There's another helicopter nearby. And then a shimmering thing comes over and a hatch opens up. It's the Blade ship. And it creates a hologram helicopter flying on the same flight path as the original one. The other one gets taken into this little shaft hatch thing, into a hangar. Apparently it was stunned, so the blade stopped rotoring and the pilots must be stunned, whatever. The Animorphs latch onto it and get taken up into the hangar of the Blade ship. And I will just say, bloody hell, the Yeerks have some serious technology. If they can do that's chi level. That's chi level technology. A hologram of a helicopter. That is advanced shit. That's advanced shit. And you've got to remember as well, the other Chelamopopter must have its radar. And it would see something weird going on, surely. Although I imagine what's probably happening is the Blade ship is just also following that flight path, so it's right above. But in that case, right, so the Blade ship is not being picked up by radar. The original helicopter has now gone into the Blade ship. Those radar beams are now not hitting that helicopter. The hologram is a hologram and will not bounce back radar, as far as we know. So, as far as these other pilots are concerned, this one's just fucking disappeared. Even though they can see it, it's not being registered on their radars. So they must be just thinking, what the fuck is going on here? But that's too technological for a kid's book, let's be honest. The Animorphs end up under, or at least most of them, because Rachel and Tobias are still outside of the Blade ship. Most of the Animorphs, including David, are now underneath this helicopter as it's landed, or has been placed down in this hangar. And they decide, right, we're in a bit of a sticky situation here. Marco sees somebody in a grey suit and black shoes with a gash in it getting dragged off, and he just assumes must be the president, because Marco has very good insight as to the type of footwear and the types of marks in that footwear that the president would wear. Maybe he does, I don't know. They decide to morph Cockroach because they need a way out of there. And of course, this is David's first time morphing Bug. Jake decides to bring him on the mission without first introducing him to a bug morph just in case they needed it. And of course, it bites him in the ass because David starts screaming because morphing Bug is probably not the most pleasant thing in the world to see or even go through. Let's be honest. So the Yeerks move this helicopter up, look down. They see these cockroaches. The Visser's there because Visser's always there. Thanks, Popperina. And he tells us Hork-Bajir to stomp it. And being like the stormtroopers, the controllers, both human and Hork-Bajir are, they can't even stomp their feet accurately, let alone shoot their weapons accurately. So they practically miss every time. And the Animorphs go under a little slot underneath the hangar, and the Yeerks gas it somehow. But they end up in a secret little room just off. And what do you fucking know? They end up underneath the shoe with the conveniently placed gash in it, which so conveniently they know happens to belong to the President of the United States. Let that sink in. I mean, we talk about plot convenience a lot, but and this isn't the worst case we've had, but it just gets to the point where you think, really? Are you really? Whatever. They crawl up his leg. And then it turns out the Visser isn't going to infest the president. He's just going to acquire him. So now the Visser, we can assume, can morph the president. What he plans to do with that, we don't know at this stage, but we know that he can now morph the president, and that's bad news. I don't actually know how the series is going to handle that. The Visser 3 now having acquired the president. Surely that's a big problem. Does it get tackled again after this? I don't know. President gets put back into the helicopter, and just before he gets back on the helicopter, the animals drop out of his trouser leg, and then the hatch opens to let the helicopter out, and down they come. And that's the end of the book. It just says to be continued. So this is why it's hard to judge this on just the single book rather than the trilogy, because obviously it's going to go straight into the next book. So I can't be too harsh on things like messaging. There isn't really a message in this one, or at least not a complete message as of yet. We might see one forming over the trilogy. And obviously there's no climax to this story, so we can't judge it on that. What I will say is this book has a lot of flaws. Now, most Animorphs books have their fair share of flaws, but the character moments in this, they're just a bit off. In book 19, the characters were perfect, but pretty much spot on. This one, not so much. Marco contradicting himself quite massively near the start. Visser 3 not chasing the animals out the window, even though we've seen how impulsive he is before to just go for it, even without the Esquivel device thrown into the equation. Either it was poor writing in the other books, or it's poor writing in this book. Either way, there's poor writing involved, and this is where it's come to the forefront, so I'm blaming this one. It is a very integral book, and I will say that I read it in one go, essentially, which, as I've said before, is always a sign that I've been reasonably entertained by the book. More than reasonably entertained. If I read a book in near enough one sitting, then I think to myself, I wanted to do that. I wanted to continue reading. It hooked me. It had me hooked. And this book certainly did have me hooked. There's a lot of entertaining stuff in here and a lot of interesting stuff. It's just let down by these awful moments, the worst of it being Marco. It's not laying into David, but it's just being so cold and close to evil with David. This guy's life's just been ruined, and Marco's just almost like deliberately making it worse. And because David has a cat called Megadeth. Marco doesn't know this guy. He's known him for a day. He's not even known him for a day. He's just been an acquaintance for a day, and he's going to jump to that. Marco, that's awful. That really is awful. Jake's leadership is pretty dire. It is pretty dire. The whole thing near the end, don't take David with you. He doesn't know the morphs. That's just not good. Not sending owls to David's house in the first place, where you know you've got that, and just letting Marco do the short straws thing. No, you've got to put your foot down and say, no, I'm the lead here. I'm delegating these roles. This is important. Jake, what do we give you? So 3 or 4. Apart from those bits, he didn't really I'm going to give him a 3, because if he'd have done a couple of good bits in there, I'd probably bump it up to a 4, perhaps even a 5, but he didn't really do anything apart from those moments. It's close to 2, but I'm going to give it a 3, okay? The book itself, it's quite difficult. It's not a 10, definitely, and it's not a 9. It's either a 7 or 8. It is very entertaining, and a lot of important stuff in here. A lot of stuff that will come important later in the series. And don't get me wrong, the whole conversation about do we want more Animorphs is very important and very interesting to see how the Animorphs go about this. So it is important in that regard. But there's just so much stuff in here that the whole David bedroom bit, I just didn't like it. I did not like it. It just didn't feel right. In a single room, there's a fucking army of stuff going on. And it's just... David's dad was a bit of a piss take. Oh, is it a 7 or 8? Fuck, I can't figure it out. My gut says 7. It would be a high 7. But the reason being is that I think of the book and I just can't justify a higher score because of the flaws. Every time they try comedy, it falls flat. And not only does it fall flat, but it ruins the moment every time. The character flaws, the bit where Marco just goes psycho, it really puts a dampener on this, what would otherwise be a fine book. I'm going to give it a 7, which is it's disappointing. The David trilogy is known for being the best, but I'm pretty certain that the next 2 books really up the ante a bit and bring the trilogy forward. But the first one of the trilogy, The Discovery, is a 7. Let's hope for better next time, where we look at The Threat. It's another Jake book, and as I mentioned earlier, Jake and Cassie are my favourite characters at the moment, so I'm looking forward to getting back into a Jake book, and looking forward to seeing how David comes across, because I will add to this, by the way, David to this point, yeah, he can be a bit of a dick and a bit naive, and a bit screaming when you're in the Yeerk hangar seems a bit like, yeah, you can probably control yourself a bit better than that. The crow thing, as I mentioned, we could put down to him being genuinely taken over by the eagle. We don't know. We don't. So at this point, there's not really too much suspicious to go on. The only suspicion we get is from Marco's own suspicion, which for the most part seems unjustified. But I'm sure in the next book, The Threat, we'll see a bit more of David's character come to the forefront. If you like fan fiction, please do check out The Interrogation and the rest of my Animorphs fanfics. The link is in the description below. This is book 55. I've gone up to 64, as well as a few side books as well. Thank you very much for watching. The next video, before we do The Threat, will be a roundup of Cycle 4, which covers books 16 through 20, including Megamorphs 2. And there's quite a few bits to go through on that, so please join me for that. I'll see you next time. Ta-ra.